So hi.
Hi.
We are at Aurora Spinnery. This is Kristen Gallagher, and what we wanted to do today with our podcast for the Vermont Sheep and Goat Association is to talk to a new wool mill in town. I'm Melissa Purley, and working together with Kelly Audie, we're bringing this Why Wool podcast for, again, Vermont Sheep and Goat. So welcome. Thanks for being willing to show us your mill. It's just beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome.
It's fun.
So what I wanted to start with is what prompted you to start the mill? Because I know that you worked somewhere, but what was the prompt to begin your own mill?
So we have had sheep for 10 plus years, and most of that time was just a couple, so we would do it by hand with my daughters and, wash the wool, card it, spin it, and get with it. But then we started kind of having enough sheep that I wanted to bring it to have it processed. And we started bringing our wool to Susan and V at Mad River Fiber Mill, 5 years ago, something like that. And that was going great. It's just hard because there was over a year turnaround time. And so I just, that made it hard to to do anything with it, basically.
Right.
So we tried a couple of different things, and I started becoming curious, and so I went to Susan at Mad River Fiber Mill and said, "Can I work here in trade for you teaching me about this? I'm super curious about this process." And that worked well. I worked there, and she taught me how to do everything. And while I was there, it came up that her building was going to go for sale, and she had a whole career before the mill, and so I think she was thinking, she just was feeling done with the day-to-day. It's a lot of moving, there's a lot of everything. Yeah. And she was really getting into teaching and doing things with the yarn at the end. And so we said, well, we'll buy it and move it to Berlin. So that was just over a year ago, and so we gutted this place. My dad, my uncle, my husband, and I did all of the construction and moved the equipment here in July. So we've been processing here since September.
That's what I was going to say. So this is, we can't see it from this vantage point, but this is part of the Dodge Farm, which is a much larger building.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the history of the building itself, because I think it's kind of cool that it's evolving into, but maintaining history with Vermont farming.
Yeah. Yes. Right. So we've been here for 14 years. This structure is a very big dairy barn. 3 barns that were moved here in the 1840s. I mean, these are all hand-hewn timbers. This is hours and hours and hours of hand work that went into this initially. And the first 6 years that we were here, we tried selling chicken and beef and eggs and vegetables and
flowers.
Goats. I milked goats, and I sold raw milk and made cheese and flowers. And all of the ways of selling food were really hard, and it was really hard for me because I went to University of Vermont and have a degree in ecological agriculture, and so agriculture is a really big deal for me, and it's my heart, and I was feeling to make money growing vegetables and all those things, I had to take a lot of the heart out of it, and I was like, okay, we have 2 daughters, 8 and 12, and so since they've been here, I'm we're just gonna grow these things, make money doing something else, because it was really important to me to keep the heart in the food and the connection with the land. And so this, we still have beef cows to keep that's been the thing that kept our land going. We make our own hay, we rotationally graze, and the cows live in a small portion of the barn, and we store hay, but it's been a big structure to maintain without a business in it. And so moving the mill here was really exciting because it legitimized all that work, and it gives the structure purpose and a bigger
new life to it.
brings me life to it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It's a beautiful space. So what are your future plans for the mill? One of the things that you and I have talked about is increasing the awareness of why wearing wool, and also, in other words, choosing it over plastic products. So what does the future look like for you? What are you're getting started now, and you're testing the water, and so what does it look like moving forward? What are your hopes and dreams for it as you see it going forward?
Yeah, well, so there's kind of two different parts of the mill. One part is custom work, and the other part is our products. And they kind of intermix, but I kind of look at it as two different paths that both have enriching possibilities in increasing the wearability of wool and the times we wear wool. So, and use it, not just wear it, but use it in all different capacities. So working with farms is super rewarding. It's really fun when people come and they already have a product in mind that they've already been making, and I can figure out how to make exactly what they want. Like a lot of times they'll bring me like, I want this yarn. I'm like, okay, I'm going to copy this yarn. Perfect. Or, people that have wool, that want to do the farming and need, some support in figuring out how to make a product themselves, or, then we go into the category of Aurora Spinnery, like how can we offer products that utilize the wool that's available. One of the ventures that I've been interested in is bringing Merino back to Vermont. We have a flock of about 20 right now, and are going to increase. The history of Merino has been really interesting to me because Vermont used to have lots of Merino. Like, in fact, there were like 2 million sheep and like 200,000 people or something crazy like that. Like, there was way more sheep than people. And if you go to the State House, like the old pictures of the State House, like the fields around are just all sheep, right? Like this
no forestation.
Right. Yeah, I mean the deforestation part was a bummer.
Yeah. But I mean, making room for those sheep.
Making room for the sheep, right. I mean, and why did we have so many sheep? Well, because so many people were wearing wool. There were over 400 mills in the 1800s in Vermont. So, during Civil War, Vermont was pretty integral in the North's plan because we had Merino sheep for uniforms, the wool of uniforms, and the Morgan horse, this like small, compact, rugged animal that could go to war, right?
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. So how does this mill, I've been up, Kelly lives up at the moment in Ferrisburg near Rokeby, and they had the mill, and you can see the old, where they wash the sheep in the stream, and they have the whole thing going on, which is so cool.
Yeah.
So it's been part of the fiber of our state, pardon the pun, for so long, but we've gotten away from it, right? We've gotten away from it do you think it's a cost thing, or, how can we bring that back, and what does this mill look like? Obviously more modernized, but what's different than the mills that used to be here, or is it very similar still?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that this mill is closer to what was around in the 1800s. I mean, they were all like much smaller scale, probably much more water powered. But I think a couple of things have happened since then. So I think that after, so Vermont had all these Merino sheep, there was all this wool wearing going on, and then the sheep moved west, and it's easier to be a sheep farmer out west for some reasons, a couple of them being that there's a lot of state land that you can graze on, and so you don't have to own land or pay taxes on land, and throughout the last 2 centuries, they've been subsidized in certain ways, and it's often the more sheep you have, the more money you have. So that's creating this dynamic where the eastern farms have had to change their ways to compete with that. And I think the ways that we've been doing that are amazing, but a lot of that is making fiber from sheep that are mostly raised for meat and the wool is a byproduct, or really hardy sheep like Icelandic and Shetland, and sheep that the animals are wonderful to have, and the whole system is great, but you're going to have a product that's a little itchy, and it's like those are awesome sweaters if you have acclimatized your skin to handling that, or it's a bigger outer sweater or something. I think that a lot of people, my family included, have gone away from being okay with wool on our skin. About 5 years ago, we switched exclusively to wool long underwear, and there was a time period where there was a lot of bickering. Yeah, like, this is uncomfortable, and but then we all got over it. It was like, so we can do it. We can go back to it being comfortable, and now it's like, wow, this is amazing. This stuff doesn't stink. It doesn't, like plastic clothes are such a bummer to, in a lot of ways.
Yes. But so don't you think, like anything, that we've kind of bought into the idea that that's the better way to go, that's the less expensive way to go, and so do you feel that something like small mills and things are the way back? I mean, kind of the doorway into the past, which I feel sometimes is the gateway into the future, because there's so much to be learned from what was done before and what worked before, like bringing back the Merino breed, and do you think that that's valuable, and do you think the small mills are the path to that?
Well, I think yes, mostly because the nature of a small mill means that there's going to be more of them.
Yeah.
And so, if there's more mills closer dispersed, then each one is in contact with its fiber shed, its neighbors, its community, and that's what makes everybody stronger. Not necessarily just the products that a small mill would make compared to a bigger one, although that does make a big difference too. Like one of the reasons I want to bring the Merino back is that it's so easy to wear. Like we've been knitting. My daughter, my 8-year-old, is super into crocheting. She's making these hats, and everyone's like, they're a dream to wear. There's no itch factor whatsoever, and so that can be a real door opener for folks. Like if you can wear wool and it doesn't itch you, that's a good selling point.
Right. And that is one of your drives for raising Merino. Are you going to have your flock exclusively? Is that what you'd like to do? Is that the ideal for you?
Exclusively Merino?
Yeah.
No, I mean, so we started 6 years ago with some border Leicesters from Catherine's farm, Hand and Heart, and I can't imagine them ever going anywhere.
Yeah.
So we.
But moving forward, you'd like to bring Merino. You'd like to see Merino.
Yeah. I mean, so that's definitely an offering that I want to increase, and the other way that I'm doing that is to. So one of the things that happens when you have a mill, especially in the East, with people that have medium weight wool, they say I want to blend it with something like Merino so that you get this, you get
softer.
You get a softer, lighter yarn, and that's usually done by buying Merino top from Chargers or another big processor. And so what I've been telling people is I will blend, but I'm going to buy from these 3 farms that I work with. Cascadnac, who has alpaca that's like as fine as Merino, and even down to cashmere micron weight. It's amazing. And then Wilhigh Farm and Fox and Hound Farm in New York are 2 farms that I'm buying bulk Merino and processing here for blending and for our products as well. And I'm explaining what the difference is. Like the dynamic right now is that the mills out west will buy Merino or the other fine wool breeds for $3 a pound, and so they set the price. No mill will pay more than that, and so the eastern small farms can't compete with that. The only way that works for the farmers, the ranchers out west, is because they, like we said, they don't have
so many.
well, they have so many, but they also don't have to own their own land.
Yeah.
They don't have to pay taxes. And if there's a subsidy that's being handed out, then they're the ones that receive it.
Yeah. So we have to do something like this if we're going to support, too, the small, we're talking about a lot on this podcast about small ag and people being able to get into it. And in order for people to have a product that can make them money, these are the kind of mills we have to support and have so that we can get the prices that we need to get, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and so that's paying the farmer ultimately the price per pound that's going to make it so that they can raise sheep.
Then they can raise sheep.
Right.
Because it's not free.
It's not free.
It's not free.
No. I mean, and so once you start raising fiber sheep that are raised for fiber instead of meat, often, the management is different. Like, Merino has a bad rap in the East. People say, oh, you can't raise Merino here. They do much better out West or in Australia, New Zealand. And I think on a bigger scale that might be true, but, so if you trim hooves more regularly and you offer shade and shelter because they have such a high lanolin content that they get fly strike easier, but that has to be, in conjunction with being outside and being wet, whereas, like we always offer shelter for the sheep, either solar panels or trees or something, and so those problems aren't as big of a deal. But Merino you shear once a year, and you get, they're a bigger sheep, and so you'd get more than like Icelandic or Shetland, but you'd still only get 8 to 10 pounds once a year, and a lot of that is lanolin that washes out. So from that, you're going to get 4 pounds through your mill. And then, another factor is that the wethers make the nicest, finest, longest fiber, and if you're going to raise wethers, then that eliminates your ability to sell meat, because that's really the ones that you would sell as lambs. So if you're going to raise for fiber, you're not raising for meat. You can still have cull animals and have meat be a part of your program, but it's a really different focus. And I think that in the long run, we want to support farms breeding for fiber. I think that we're missing out by only breeding for meat.
Right. I agree. So the other thing, on the day-to-day basis here, what are some of the most common difficulties that you face? You were showing us when we were doing the tour of the mill of, when you were doing the spinning process, and you said that's the most complicated machine. Is that where most of your difficulties are, or is it wool coming in not being prepared? What is the hardest thing that you've found day to day?
I would, if I'm being completely honest, it's anything on the computer.
Oh, yeah. Amen.
That is, anything here is very tangible for me, and there's definitely roadblocks and things to learn, but I can physically touch it and figure it out, whereas, all of the computer elements are hard. That's what's hard for me.
Yeah.
But as far as the mill, like the specific to mill work, I would say that the intake wool is a struggle. I think that people just don't really know, like what is clotting, what is, how do I take burdock out, where do I skirt, and so that. I keep having in my mind it'd be so cool to take pictures and put stuff online because people want to know. It's just like it's something.
Class or something, offer class or something.
Yeah. I actually went to a VSGA skirting workshop this summer, and it's super helpful. I think you have to just see it happen.
Yeah. So one of the things I was thinking about as a small producer, what I like about a small mill is something that we've done is the opportunity to sit down with the owner of the mill and say, what is possible? Here's what we have. Here's what we do. So that communication is, I think, to me, one of the best things about being in the Northeast and being specifically in Vermont is the ability to walk into this mill and sit down and have a cup of tea and talk with the mill owner and say, what can I bring you and what can you do with it? And how can I work with another producer and use my wool, which is wonderful. And so my question is, if I'm going to bring something something to you? And obviously I've spoken with you, but do I have to have a certain amount? Do I have to, it may be specific for projects, but if someone's going to come, I think they might think one of the things we're doing with this podcast is helping to educate people so that they feel comfortable raising sheep specifically for fiber. It's why it's why wool, right?
Right, yeah.
But I would want to know, what do I need to know to come into your mill? How do I store the wool so that it's safe and good? And then do I need a certain amount? Do I need to have it carted? What do I need to do before I come in?
So our minimum batch size is 6 pounds. That's what one load in the wash is. So for a lot of breeds, that's one sheep. For Shetland and Icelandic, it's 2 or 3. I ask that if it's lamb's wool, you let me know, because a 100% run of lamb's wool is not going to turn out well for me. Blended, it's wonderful, but the lamb's wool is really inconsistent in its length and is brittle at the tips, and it just is, it goes through the equipment differently. When you're storing wool, it's really important to put it in clear plastic bags. Wool moths don't like sunlight, and so that helps to deter them. Wool can be stored for a year plus that way, periodically checking, because they're mysterious in their ways. They just show up no matter what. But it does get harder to wash as it sits. The lanolin kind of crystallizes and doesn't come out as easily. So you can bring me 6 pounds. It's the smallest batch. We price bracket, so if you have a bigger lot, then it gets cheaper per pound.
But if you were a home knitter, not even a spinner, and you had a few sheep, you could technically bring that 6 pounds that you've sheared in the year's time, or in one, depending on your number of sheep, and have yarn made for yourself then.
Yeah, totally.
So you're not dependent, you're not a mill that's going to say you have to have 50 pounds for us to even look at your stuff.
Right.
Is that a benefit to you? I mean, it's a benefit to you because you're helping your people.
So the bigger the batch size, the more efficient I can run. Like the smaller the batch, you just get more waste.
Yeah.
So,
and you're running machines in a way that isn't efficient to you.
Right, yeah. Like there's 12 bobbins on the spinner. It's great if they're all full. If they're not, then they're not, and that's fine. Everything doesn't have to. We're not at max efficiency here. That's not the type of equipment this is, or the business. But there are kind of sweet spots. Like we've had people bring us their flock, and it's 4 different types of sheep, and we just blend it all together, and you get this lovely gray yarn, and it's. Or you can separate it and say, like, okay, this is Callie, this is Tova, and so one of the reasons that I love doing that is that it gets people excited to wear that sweater, to use that product, because it's this particular sheep that you love and you pet each day. It's a connection with the sheep and the land.
It's an interesting thing. Someone contacted me and they wanted to buy yarn. They wanted a connection to our farm. And so they're buying the yarn, and I put them in connection with a knitter. And so they'll have yarn from our farm as their sweater. And I think that connection is a really special thing to be able to facilitate. So
totally. Then a sweater's like a hug, right?
It is.
A hug from your neighbors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I love about the mill is that you have 2 daughters, and it's family driven. The noise that we hear in the background is Kristen's dad, who also works here, which is wonderful.
Employee.
Very dedicated employee, maybe slightly underpaid. But it is primarily, besides being family, because I know that your husband is part of this too.
Yeah.
But when we went to like Mary Lakes, one of the threads, again the pun, running through this is a lot of this is female driven, and I love that. And so I know one of your daughters is homeschooled, so what do you hope that as a female farmer, business owner, what do you hope that having this mill, besides obviously the product, but what do you hope this teaches them? What do you think it has to teach them, utilizing your land and utilizing your farm and the history of the farm? What do you think it has to teach your daughters?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and I feel like I'm often the student in the parent-child relationship, and because I come at this with like, oh, well, this is what it means to me, and this is what I hope you learn, and all these things. And whenever I come with that agenda, there's bristly pushback, and so the biggest thing that Lauren and I hope is that just time spent immersed in this environment of being on the land, being with the sheep, being in this environment, that will create a certain person that just has that connection in their bones. It's not like there isn't anything I can tell them that is like, oh, okay, I should be connected to my land, or all this stuff. It's just like feeling it day in and day out. Because sometimes they're like, gosh, you're only ever in the mill and blah 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 blah, and it's super frustrating to have a family business too, because it's it's not our property, and like it's hard. It seeps into everything, right? There isn't this like, oh, I'm going to work, I'm home from work, and but even to me, like, that's a lifestyle, and you see the benefits of it, and you feel the struggles of it. Like they're often on a weekend day, my kids will be in here making things. They make these wall ornaments on the felting table. Like they're amazing artists, and they wouldn't have that outlet if we hadn't done, created this. And so I feel like just being a leader, like setting an example, I just hope that they seep it in.
Osmosis.
And then I get to watch and see what, because my 12-year-old is still like, why do we do things differently? Like, why don't I have a cell phone? Everyone else is playing video games. But it's interesting. Like, I was like, okay, you want to play video games? I'll bring you to your friend's house. And she sat and played video games for 3 hours. And she's like, I hate video games. I can't do this.
It's a lot makes it felt.
Right?
I know.
Yeah.
It's the pushback.
It's the pushback. It's like if I say it, then they're going the other direction, and if I just do it, then they're curious.
Yes, and they live it, and like you said, day to day, they're just going to take it in.
Right.
Yeah. So we like to end with the question that we begin with in the podcast, which is, Kristen, why wool? Why should we wear wool? Why wool for you? Why is it important?
When I think about that question, the thing that comes to mind for me is that wool connects us to animals and the land, that every wool garment has a story behind it, and that even if we don't know what that story is, we still feel it. And then the farmers that are integral in the day-to-day story, that's a lot. It's a big connection. And so why wool for me is to get people on the land connected with rain and soil and the full cycle of life. Life and death, right? I mean, like there's all of it. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your beautiful mill, Aurora Spinnery, Kristen Gallagher. I'm Melissa Purley, and this is Kelly Audie, and thank you so much for joining us. Why wool? So, Kristen, could you take us on a walkthrough with your beautiful mill space and take us from start to finish for some of the processes that are going to happen in the mill?
Yes.
Okay.
Walk this way. So this is where it all starts. The washing machine.
It's where everything starts with the washing machine, though, right?
So we take the raw wool, and this is, not very different than a clothes washer, except that our water is 180 degrees, and the rotation, the movement is really subtle and gentle. So special soap, and it has different cycles. Some wool is a lot easier to wash than others. Alpaca is different than wool. So that's that. Pretty basic, as is our drying system. Passive drying on racks. Sometimes we put fans on it. but air dries, and then it comes over to the picker. And we'll just grab a handful of this so I can show you. Most things go through the picker, not everything, because it has pretty aggressive teeth. So something like your lower micron alpaca or merino does not go through here.
And the picker is to take what from it?
It opens it.
Okay.
It's an opener.
It's an opener.
Yes. And so you can put it on the belt here, and that is going to be the place to watch. So you might want to go there. When you're done a batch, the whole room will just
Is the whole room filled?
Well, we made it long enough so that you can get in there, but there's a big mountain, like the walls will be covered, and it'll just be like this, whoosh, of wool.
Yeah.
And this is where we can condition it.
This is kind of like Willy Wonka's now. Because, the whole thing fills up just
yes,
like...
right, totally. The flowing river of chocolate or wool. Yes, totally. My girls love it in there. It's so joyful. So then you toss it, put the conditioner on it, which is a lot like hair conditioner. The purpose is to make it less frizzy, less static as it goes through the equipment. And you can see over here, right now we're doing cashmere on the fiber separator, and this is what happens with static. You can just see it's just like this stuff is most prone to static of all the fibers, but this is, and I even have some extra conditioner here just to keep it under control because it just wants to fly away.
Yeah. Before we leave, I'm going to use a little on my own hair.
Right? This is a tough time of year anyways, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so this is the fiber separator, and a lot of mills don't have this tool. This is something that Belfast makes, and it makes cashmere possible because what it does is drops out like short fibers, like second cuts, drop right out, and coarse, long pieces. So like I think it's the tog in Icelandic, some of those will fall out. And this is another dual coat breed. Can you see the hairs in here?
Yeah.
Those have to come out to have cashmere be luxurious. So those get dropped out. So this tool makes those yarns possible, or those products possible. So when it comes out, it collects in this box and is now called Cloud. This is called Cloud.
Oh, it's perfect.
Right?
Yes.
Yes. And with our Cloud, we make roving. So we bring our Cloud over here, and this is the first stage that we start stringing it and getting it ready to make yarn. So each feed is weighed because we want our yarn to be consistent and therefore our roving to be consistent. So right now this is Romney Cloud, and we have 3 ounces per feed, and I can turn this on so you can watch the roving come out and collect in our buckets. This tool has a series of drums, and it goes like this around this big swift. And then then comes off, and this curtain gets pulled into the roving deck and goes through what's called a false twist, which just gets it twisted enough to stay together. And now it goes to the draw frame. And so there's different types of yarn that's made. Like the old woolen mills would make woolen yarn, and that is basically yarn that just goes from the carder to the spinner. So it's really lofty because a lot of the fibers are going all different directions. So you get this like puffy yarn. A worsted yarn goes through a pin drafter. It's the only way you can make worsted yarn. That's what defines it. So pin drafter is a big tool that has combs in it, and the roving is pulled through this set of combs, teeth that go and Belfast decided not to go the pin drafter route because they're really expensive to make and maintain, and so they came up with the draw frame, and the draw frame makes something that's called semi-worsted because we're combing the fibers, but just not as much as the pin drafter would. Another way of getting semi-worsted would be something like what Green Mountain Spinnery does, which off of their carder, they have lots of little things making lots of little pencil roving. So instead of one thick roving, you get a number of thinner pencil roving that you would spin. And Bartlett does that too. A lot of the older mills do it that way. Okay, so the draw frame has these teeth right here. And you see the teeth, and as the roving is pulled, so this wheel is going at a different speed than this one, so it drafts it while it pulls it through the teeth. This roving is total junk stuff, so that's why it's all bumpy. But you can see that it goes through here twice generally, and if you look at the difference, this is more puffy, this starts to be flatter, things are going in the same direction, and it gets thinner so that it goes through the spinner better. It doesn't have to draft as much. So then it comes to the spinner. And if everything has gone well, if we've been meticulous about the job that we've done on all the other equipment, then things go really smoothly at the spinner. It doesn't. This is definitely the most complicated tool. There's a lot of different things you can adjust, and with Belfast equipment, you can even take things off. Like if I was to make Lopi, I would take this roller and this curtain belt off, and then you basically eliminate most of the draft, and so then you're just spinning one fat single. Right now, we're doing this funky mix of everything on the bobbin, so I can show you what this looks like, but you can see that we have the buckets of, so some people, after it comes off of the pin drafter or the draw frame, call it a sliber. I don't, I still call it roving, but whatever you want to call it, it's in the buckets, and it's coming through. This is the draft zone, so this is a lot like hand spinning. If you've ever hand spun, you hold and draft and then release to let it spin, to twist, I mean. And so this is the twist zone, this is the draft zone. So you can see it as it goes through. I'm explaining it now because it's very loud. The reason that I just put crap roving through here is that if I was doing an order or even yarn for myself, I wouldn't want to start and stop the spinner. Each time you start and stop it, you get an inconsistent, thin, thick, some imperfection in the yarn. So this is being twisted at a Z. The plier is basically the same exact thing, just goes the other direction. To take 2 strands, 3, 4, however many strands you want to put together to ply into yarn. So here we're taking 2, spinning in the opposite direction, going back on the bobbin. No, because you do still put twist on this, so the speed of this roller in ratio to the speed of the spindle is what creates your twist.
Okay.
And so you do a different twist for a 2-ply than a 3-ply, so it all has to be the same yarn that you're making.
Right.
Yeah. But so now you have yarn, and from this point we go into the back corner, and we put it on cones, and then we steam it, which sets the twist. If you stretch it and steam it at the same time, then it's kind of takes little like extra twists or not enough twists and levels everything out so that you're left with a really well draping, evenly twisted yarn. And then we measure it on the skein winder to make individual skeins. Here's the bag. This is Shetland.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely. I love the color too.
Right?
Yeah.
And then we take one of these, and I'll just come up behind you. And twist it up. And so there you have.
I did a bunch of skein by hand. That is much easier.
Right?
Much easier.
Much easier. Yeah. So that's the yarn. The other, so here's some Lopi. We thought this is kind of fun because these are both Icelandic, and this is a 2-ply, and this is Lopi. So
define Lopi again.
So Lopi is Icelandic single ply.
Single ply.
Very bulky.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is what the Icelandic sweaters are famously made from. And you can feel like if you have a single ply and you leave it, like the thinner the yarn, the more twist you have to give it. Mm-hmm. And so you lose some of that soft, fluffy feeling. So this just feels differently, right?
Yes, it feels very different.
Yep. Yeah. So that's what those big fluffy sweaters.
Yeah.
Which one do you like better?
This one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, and I feel like it's satisfying to knit with. They would go very quickly, right?
I just have curly hair.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so good. Okay, so we do a lot of yarn here, but one of the things that is really great about Belfast equipment is that you can make other products as well. So 2 other products that we make here are rug yarn, also called core spun, and felt sheets. So we'll check those pieces out. This is the core spun attachment. It goes on the carder, and this is cotton core. I am starting to like to use wool core better. This has wool core, but it basically twists wool around a piece of yarn. So the yarn can be cotton or wool. But this is a highly desirable product, especially for people that do alpaca, because the blanket is, just a percentage of the fiber that comes off of the animal. There's what they call seconds that come from the legs and the neck that are shorter, a little bit more coarse, but still really nice. And And then another way that you would find seconds would be like if you had wool or alpaca that had wool break. Have you ever had this with your sheep?
Yeah.
Where there's a sickness usually or a hard pregnancy, and in the fiber there's a spot that's really sensitive and would break. So that's not going to make great yarn. But what do you do with it? You could make this. And so this you can make, mostly rugs. So here is an example of a rug. One of the things that we're experimenting with right now is working with this weaver, Rachel Wiley, and I think I'm gonna. So this was one of her styles. I'm gonna have her do something a lot tighter and try to make yoga mats for people. One of the things that we're trying to do is figure out how to help people use their fiber that just want to farm and not be the marketer too. And so we're trying different ways to do that. So one way is to connect different farms with producers, like Wild Earth Farm making sponges, and so we're helping her. We make the bat, and then she felts the sponge, and so we're helping connect her with different farms, like Too Few Farm, for wool to make her product. So we want to support that, and we also want to offer some things here with people's fiber. So I'm doing a trial run right now with Flack Farm, which makes kimchi and dairy products. And they also have sheep, and they have just like stored wool in their barn, right? And they, it feels like a big investment to get yarn spun and then try to sell yarn, and what are you going to do with it? And they're like, we want one sweater's worth, but not boxes and boxes. And so we're doing a trial where they're going to bring me batches of 30 pounds, and I'm going to give them a percentage back in products that they want, and then use the rest for our products. And sell those things with our name using their farm name as well, so that there can be some collaboration, and support each other and just use the wool that's in the barns, because there's wool in the barns. I think this is especially, I see this as being a lot of struggle because people are focusing on selling meat, but sheep still need to be shorn. And so there's you look at these bags of wool and it's this great resource, but you're busy farming for meat and you're doing all these other things, and who's going to buy the wool? So we're hoping that we can create this story to get more people wearing wool, interested in wool, not just in yarn definitely, but also rugs, yoga mats, shower curtains, vests. So we've been, one of the women that works here is a seamstress, and we've been designing different vests with her from our felt that we make. Felt is another thing that is made from seconds. So I'll show you the felting table. So we make bats on the carder. This is a bat. We've actually had people buy bats just for stuffing quilts and different felting projects for themselves. If we laid out on this felting table, it wet felts, and so you get this funky edge and a sheet of felt that Esme has been, designing the pattern for and cutting up. But I can make thin ones too that make awesome shower curtains. So those are some things that we're playing around with to try to offer different products to get more wool used and more accessible to people that want to use wool and don't have it figured out.